Welcome to the Sheila Mack Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mack, and today we have special guest Danielle Halataria. She is a passionate leader in the economics and public policy space, looking to grapple with one of the world's oldest and most widespread issues of poverty. She studied economics at the University of Chicago and has expanded her research into the fields of investment banking, public policy, information technology, and asset management on her mission to tackle extreme poverty. Throughout her work, she has received such honorable distinctions as the first undergraduate Rising Star Award in the Trout Business Program and her status as a Kempton Fellow. When she is not addressing extreme poverty, you may find her updating her fun fashion-focused Instagram account. All right, welcome, Danielle. Welcome to the show. And I like to start out each show this show is based on my new best-selling book, Bootstraps and Bra Straps, the formula to go from rock bottom back into action in any situation. And this year we have had just about every situation hit us globally. So I'd love for you to share about maybe a time in your business or personal life where you've hit a tough situation and how you got back on track.
Definitely. And thank you for asking the question. And I'd say I think a story that actually aligns with the book as well is a situation I found myself in this last summer, back in 2019. So I just finished up an internship in investment banking, which was really the peak of what I was working towards in terms of my academic achievements and my educational trajectory. A lot of what I share in Ability and Empower and the little bit of introduction in the first chapter as well is how much of a planner I am. I love looking out into the future and thinking about how I'd like my steps to go. And I share a story about how in the third grade I had my entire life mapped out, like what I would major in college, what I would do as a career, etc. But I found myself doing exactly the work I thought I wanted to do, exactly the work I planned to do, but I wasn't feeling fulfilled yet. I felt like there was something missing, and I was kind of lost because I thought, well, this is what I've always known, this is what I've always planned to do. So where do I go next? Like, what's missing for me? And I took some time to reflect, and I thought back to the moments that I found myself walking past homeless people on my way to work every single day while I was going into the office and working on, $1 million, sometimes even $1 billion deals, and thinking, like, how is it possible that these two worlds can coexist? Like, what is this? How is this possible that these two things are happening at the same time? And I decided to really dig into that question a bit more of understanding how poverty and such opulence and wealth can exist in the same world. And the end result of that was Uplift and Empower. So, it's the backstory of the book, but it was a pivotal moment in my personal growth and trajectory, recognizing, I had this very elaborate, long thought out plan for myself, but there was something more that I needed, the background that I had and the experiences that I had to get to. And now I found myself on this new path, and I'm completely focused on this topic now. So it was a moment of enlightenment for me to just understand, this is something that I think everybody should be talking more about. There are over 700 million people living in extreme poverty today, as we know, and that the number has actually increased due to COVID-19. So I think this topic should be top of mind for everyone, really.
Yes, that is such an important topic, and something that I myself, as a young girl, I remember at a young age, my mother told me get out of the house. I needed to not be there anymore. There was so much abuse. So from 10 to 13 and a half, I was homeless. I didn't even know it was called homeless. I just thought I was on an adventure, and I would use payphones to call and check in with my mother. And, and I would go from home to home, and sometimes I slept out, or I would just stay up all night and then sleep at a friend's house during the day. And I worked little part-time jobs with junior careers and all this. I didn't even know what I didn't know. And then I found foster care. I didn't know there was such a thing as foster care because nobody told me. And I ended up, having to turn myself in as a runaway. And I was like, well, I didn't really run away. My mother told me to go, and she knows where I'm at. She knows I'm out there, and she can't help me. And so, I was able to stay there for a few years, and I thought, wow, this is great. I have clothing. I have clothing allowance. I was able to work 3 jobs, and get I had great grades in school because things were so much easier not having to survive. It's really
Yeah.
tough
Yeah.
to learn and do things when you're in survival mode. It really
Exactly.
is. It's hard. And I enjoyed that, and then I emancipated at 15 and graduated high school at 15 and went on my own and went to college early. And so that was kind of my experience. And I remember later on, I think it was probably 8 or 9 years ago that I started a small event program called Hollywood's Forgotten Heart. And that's a program that I actually moved to the Hollywood area. And when I was living there, I went to a Pilates studio, and right there, you walking over and past so many homeless people to get to these studios where a lot of the famous people are going to get their to get all their programs and everything. And I'm like, well, doesn't anybody see all these homeless people here? This is the richest place on earth. This is the capital of the entertainment industry. How is it that nobody sees this, or nothing is being done, or not enough obviously was being done? And as much as we could do, we had regular events where lots of people would donate their time and put an event together, and then we would literally go out and give the homeless people packages, care packages, and resources, and help them, because a lot of times they don't want to go to the shelters because the shelters aren't safe, or they feel they're not safe, or whatever. And yes, there are people that are homeless that are getting through drug addiction or have a mental illness, and then there are people that just are down on their luck. There were young teenage kids that didn't know, like for me, I was not even a teenager 10 years old and out there and didn't even know I was homeless. And I was very resourceful. I remember sleeping on the benches at the Troubadour, and some of the because a friend was dating one of the people that worked there years ago. And so I had to just figure things out. But it's a scary and difficult thing that people don't want to talk about.
Definitely. It's actually interesting that you mentioned the dichotomy there between like going to those the expensive Pilates studio while also passing out homeless people. I remember over that same summer there was a point earlier in the summer where the apartment building I was lived in sent out a letter to all the residents and said, oh, we've received some complaints from residents that the homeless population outside the building is making people uncomfortable. And I think that for me was when I really started paying more attention, because I just thought, like, again, like the majority of people in this building are like working with the same kind of opportunities, and yet you're treating homeless people as if they're an inconvenience, and this is actually a major problem we should all be facing personally, right? So I think definitely in moments like that where you're seeing the almost like the clash between the two is where like you're really kind of forced to face things like just right directly. So
Yes. So what type of action steps are you involved with, or programs that are trying to make a difference right now with the homeless population actually increasing so much this year?
yeah, well, I'd say step one for me has just been educating my local community and beyond. So taking opportunities like these, reaching out to new audiences. The whole purpose of the book is really to demystify this entire topic. At least for me personally, I wasn't really familiar with these terms until I started my research, and the whole point of it was to take what often are like these like really lengthy and more academic jargon focused topic research papers, etc., and breaking them down into more easily digestible, to more of an easily digestible format. So it's a guide to understanding extreme poverty, people who've never considered the topic before. So I break down some of those big ideas. And in terms of action, one thing I recommend in the book is to look locally instead of constantly thinking abroad. Oftentimes too, when a person who isn't familiar with the topic thinks about extreme poverty, you're not thinking about the homeless person in your community, in your neighborhood. You're thinking about the poverty advertisements that you see on TV featuring a child with a fly in their face living in a slum overseas. But there's poverty everywhere we are, right? Like you mentioned your own personal experience, like having to like live in a homeless state, like finding a foster care center, etc. So there's poverty everywhere we are. So one thing I really emphasize is, instead of thinking about this as an abstract issue that's only faced in other countries, think about your community, think about your neighborhood, and think about what privileges that you personally have that can be transferred to someone else. So start with that identification of a privilege. From there, think about your community knowledge, how you possibly apply it, and then take action based on that. And in my personal context, I started a scholarship fund. So I knew I had the privilege of getting a college education. I thought back to my personal community experience. I went to a public high school. I had a lot of classmates, myself included, who knew we couldn't afford to attend college. Like, we were very passionate about education. We wanted to move forward in our education. But as you and I'm sure a lot of others know, like, it's really expensive to get education in the States. So we have to get these scholarships. And I thought, well, I have this privilege of a higher education. I know there's a need in my community. I'm going to go ahead and take action and start the scholarship fund. So as an extension of the pre-sale campaign I had for my book, I established a fundraiser for that fund, and I'm currently still raising funds for that as well. And I have a link to that across my social media profiles. And actually, as of this past month, we just raised enough to provide a $500 scholarship for high school senior and at the end of this academic year. So just taking action in small ways based on local knowledge to make an impact where you are, I think, is an absolutely critical way to address this topic, because it's not something that's only faced overseas. There are people living in poverty in every community and every neighborhood that are sometimes just not seen, so.
Yes, and I think that this year, more than ever, poverty and just financial distress is hitting families that have never ever dealt with this situation before in their lives, because they've always had steady income. They may both have college educations, and it doesn't matter because the companies just went under because of COVID and our current worldwide situation. So there's a lot that's affecting. It's not anybody's fault. It's just the situation at hand. And so one of the things I share on the show, just about every single episode, I do share about the 211. And I don't know if you've heard of 211 or not, but 211 is it used to be that you dialed 411 back in the day before your time, I think. Back in the day, it would be 411 is your information. Well, 211, if you dial it, or if you Google 211 and your state in the United States, or the province in Canada, any province in Canada, you will find resources. So that is food banks, that's getting clothing, that's getting help, that's shelters, that's maybe if you're in a domestic abuse situation, being able to get out, ways to get out, help with that. There's help with drug addiction situations, abuse. Let's see, there's also rental assistance, help with extending that for those that are having there's like a special situation where you don't have to pay rent with the COVID, but then that's changed in some states and people are starting to get evictions. Well, there's help for that in most of these states. And so look and see. And if you're an employer, if you have a company, or maybe at school or wherever you're at, post that, see where you can share that, whether you're on a Zoom calls now instead of going to work, or at work, post that. A lot of times you may be working with somebody and you don't know what's going on at home. Maybe they don't want to ask for help. Maybe they're embarrassed about it. But if you post the information, or just keep 211 is really simple. Keep in mind, it's something you can share that could change somebody's life and trajectory and ability to get help. The sooner people can get the help they need and the resources, the sooner they're able to start rebuilding their life and getting back on track. And if you are going through this tough situation, it doesn't mean you have to be stuck there forever. It's not hopeless. It's just a moment in time.
And I actually, just kind of like continuing off of that as well, I actually have a page on abookthatempower.com dedicated to like how you can help and kind of sharing resources along those lines as well. So in the book, I break down the Oxford has basically a breakdown of a poverty index, kind of like going into the causes of poverty. And the three core dimensions are health, living standards, and education. And for each dimension, I offer opportunities for people to either donate or volunteer or learn more about each one, with just to provide an opportunity for people to kind of dig into not only the content of the book itself and some of the more of the context, more of the history, more of the statistics, more of the data, and a couple of stories as well. But then from there, actually take action in their communities and do that and do that in a way that's like more concrete and like more easily able to kind of connect with the content of the book as well. So definitely would recommend that people check out that page as well for more resources too. And I believe I even have a reference to two and one at the bottom of the page. So that's a helpful way to get some more context to either if you're seeking out help or looking for ways to help in your community too.
That's great. That's a wonderful book to get out there and so important. It's important because people miss it. So if you're an employer, if you're a professor, if you're out there in the world and you're a person of influence, this is a great book to have to be able to know what to look for
Definitely.
and how to help and work together in the community because each of us can make such a difference. That's one thing. Giving back really makes a difference, and it's a model. Let's say you're a parent and you have children at home. I have 6 children. I have 3 of my own, 3 I fostered to adopt. They're all mine, and 6 kids. And with that, it's how what I'm doing, who I'm being in all I'm doing that makes a difference. And one of the things we've always done is helped out. So I've always been a mentor in girls' homes, and I ran gift stores starting at the age of 23. And with that, I ended up running 5. And I started a program that I worked with the government. They had a program called Job Training Partnership Act. And in that program, I was able to hire what they called at-risk youth, and those were mostly kids that were either out of the juvenile detention system or out of foster care programs. They were emancipating, and nobody wanted to give them a chance. Nobody wanted to hire them to give them a job. And so I would interview them, and coming from the system myself, I kind of knew what to look for. And so we would have a talk, and I would hire them, and they would go through a 6-month training program. And this was back in the day when the video it was called a camcorder, and it wasn't our phone. We didn't even have these phones back then. That's how long ago it was. And you'd have to hold this 20-pound camera and, and film, and I would film all my training to show what I was doing with these kids. I had over 200 kids go through my training program. Some of them own their own businesses now. We still talk years later. I have online stores only, but it made a difference. So it doesn't matter what you do. Now, my daughter, she works with kids that are actually in a it's a group home program. She is training to be a psychologist. She's 24 now, and she's actually a counselor at a girls' home where the girls are teenage pregnant moms with babies. And it's a high risk, high level situation. And she's been there for 3.5, almost 4 years, and she's really good at what she does. And so it shows up.
Definitely. And I think it's actually kind of ties into, so I have a chapter on jobs and the importance of skills training, which, as you mentioned, like that, those kinds of programs are the exactly kind of work that I'm trying to promote through the book itself, and saying, like, beyond just, donating a dollar here, donating a dollar there, really invest your time into helping people living in extreme poverty, making sure I define it as sympathetic giving versus expectant giving. It's based on a framework. You can read more about it in Books and Empower, but essentially there's sympathetic giving, which is, giving as a form of sympathy, like, and you give based on how much sympathy you feel for an individual, versus expectant giving, where there's a form of exchange happening and you're really able to help someone help themselves. And I think that's the most critical piece of really just understanding, beyond just giving to make yourself feel better, make sure the quality of help you're giving helps someone to improve their livelihood, help someone to improve themselves, and just provides a sense of dignity and self-worth to an individual, instead of just, giving someone a dollar here and there. Investing in them, investing your time, investing your skills, sharing your connection, sharing your knowledge, sharing what you can in a way that's impactful and has a more long-term substantive difference in their lives. Because right now what you see is a lot of, maybe especially around the holidays, right? Like, oh, I feel like I should be giving more. I'm in a more sympathetic mood to give a couple of dollars here and there, but you don't really think about how your dollar is making an impact, a month, 2 months, a year later. But in a situation where you're providing skills training and jobs training, that could change the trajectory of a person's life. The same with education, the same with these more substantive ways to invest in individuals. So absolutely, those are some great examples that you mentioned, that, just investing in a person's life, spending a long period of time getting to know an individual, seeing what their needs are, reacting to those needs, versus just saying, like, oh, I think an individual living in poverty will need X, therefore I'll provide this. Instead, getting to know someone, having those conversations, understanding where their needs are coming from, and then reacting to those instead. I think that's where I hope poverty alleviation is heading, and I've seen some signs of it, some signs of that being true, and sometimes of that not being true. So I'm really trying to encourage people through Able to Empower, through the scholarship fund, to think more critically about the quality of help we're offering to people living in extreme poverty, so that 5-10 years from now, that we're actually making substantive change.
Yes, it's so true, and I love that because it does make a difference. And I really feel like, there's this saying, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear, and when the teacher's ready, the student will appear. And every single one of those young adults that went through my program were my my students, but they were my teachers,
Yes,
if that makes any sense. And they were
definitely,
my
definitely.
greatest teachers. So it was such a gift and something that it really does bless you in a different way when you're able to do that. And you can do that with anything that you're doing right now. It, any talent you have, to be able to share that with other people. One of the things I'm doing right now is with my book and my courses, I'm actually donating a book or a course. For each one that's sold, I donate one to women in shelters. And the courses are ways to get back on track, getting out of an abusive situation, or whatever they're going through, to actually get back on track, really starting. And that's a special group that's dedicated, very small groups, and it's dedicated to that group of people that are going through. It's mostly women, and that I'm working with in those groups, and how to get back on track and getting them connected to resources beyond what I can do, but just so that there's a support group. Because a lot of
Exactly.
times when you're in a situation like that, you feel all alone. And so
Exactly.
community is everything.
And that's another reason why I really emphasize the importance of this, like, community driven impact, looking where you are, thinking about skills and knowledge you can apply. And actually, there's a quote from the book that I reference that basically says, "In the same way that you think that you have the skills to teach someone, make sure you're willing to listen and learn as well, because that's an absolutely critical piece to making an impact." Like, you could have made the decision to donate the dollar value of your book to those women living in the shelter, but instead you gave them a tool to help them improve their lives and better themselves. That's a more impactful, substantive way of giving, because that dollar amount can give them, maybe a meal or two, but that book, the skills and the tools and the research that you put into that book will help them for a lifetime, right? So that's the kind of help that I'm trying to advocate for through Books and Empowers. Instead of giving these gifts that honestly make the giver feel better, instead
Mhm.
focusing more on the person who's receiving it and saying, look, how will this help this person to empower themselves, to improve themselves, in the literal sense, uplift and empower themselves to improve their lives? Because I think everyone is capable of doing that when given the right opportunities and resources. It's just a matter of how we, as these individuals who have the opportunity to, have these conversations, spend this time talking about this, are actually taking the action to help improve other people's lives as well. So that's absolutely along the same lines there. Instead of just giving the dollar value of that book, instead saying, no, I'll give you the book because I've spent the time to research and compile all this information for you to help yourself. So definitely.
Yes, yes. And it's such a gift when you, to me, the gift is when you see that other person has had such a change in their life, and they're fine, like, oh my gosh, I can go to college now.
Yeah.
I have a lady that I just mentioned that in another episode of the show, because I recorded a few today, where she was serving as a waitress, and she's a grandma now. She had to drop out of school, high school, when she was young because she got pregnant, and then she had 4 or 5 kids, and she didn't know she could go to college. And she thought, well, how am I ever going to do this? And we had a talk, and she went to college the next day. She didn't know she could do that. And this was, and now she's like taking on her career of her dreams and living her truth. And I thought, and that's something I shared about her story, and I got permission, and I shared about her story in my book. I felt so guided. I ran into her And when I was going out to dinner, and I needed to talk about the career chapter and how it's never too late to go for the career of your dreams. And I felt so guided. I went out to dinner when I didn't really feel like going to dinner. I was all alone, and she had this incredible story. She signed up for college the next day after we talked, and her story needed to be in that book because that's who needs to hear the story.
Exactly.
Where
And
it's
that's the
never,
exact impact. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go
yes,
ahead.
yes, it's never too late. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's just not knowing that you can do these
Yeah.
things.
Exactly. Actually,
Yes.
I share like I kind of so I have one of the chapters in the book is called the poverty mindset, and actually goes into the psychological impact of living in poverty and how that impacts like your perception of hope and things like that. And I actually share
Mhm.
like a kind of an illustration of these two paths, and it's somewhat somewhat connected to like my personal experiences, of course, like extrapolated from there. But I have these two students. One student, it comes from a more privileged background. They have access to the additional tutoring. There's the teachers are kind of all supporting them. They're constantly on the honor roll. They're basically like the privileged pathway to success that leads you to the traditional like, college, study job, etc. And then the flip side to that is one student who maybe doesn't have that parental support at home, helping with homework initially. And then from there, the teachers see them, acting up in classroom, and they comment about their behavior, and the student starts to progressively lose hope. And then there's a counselor who comes into the situation and changes that trajectory and says, no, like you do have these options. You can get the grades to go to college, etc. And like that's the impact of just knowledge and understanding, having a community of support, people who believe in you, that can make a huge difference in how someone perceives themselves and how they can move forward. And that's why I emphasize so much, just start from where you are, start from home, because you never know. Like, again, like that woman wasn't aware of her options, but you
Mhm.
being there, like you being that person of support, you saying, hey, like I've done this research, I have these skills, I have this knowledge, I'm transferring this now to you. That changes lives. It really does. And I want more people to be aware of this because I think there's so many things that, I personally take for granted in my life that I know I could be transferring to others. And I think the book is step one, but I really want this to make a ripple effect and a ripple of change where more people are saying, hey, like, I did really well in my English classes in high school and college. Maybe I could be a tutor for someone who isn't doing as well in their classes. Or like, I have connections at a local grocery store. Maybe someone can get a starting up job and just, help themselves get out of a rough spot. Like we can all be using the privileges that we have. I call them privileges, but really it's just everyday conveniences that we don't think about that can be transferred to someone else. Something as simple as having fast and consistent Wi-Fi. Maybe someone could like borrow your laptop for an hour and apply for jobs because they don't have access to a laptop consistently. It's things big and small, but they don't have to constantly be just giving money. It's skills, it's knowledge, it's time, it's connections. It's really investing into individuals instead of these like passive exchanges that can really make an impactful difference. And I think the examples you're giving are exactly the kind of work that I'm trying to promote here, which is just it's easy to go into a Facebook campaign and give $5. It
Right.
takes more time and effort and energy to actually go out and have a conversation with someone and say like, hey, I will offer you my time or my connections or my skills or my knowledge and help you help yourself. But that's the kind of help that I'm trying to advocate for because that's really what will push us forward to eradicating extreme poverty for good and then alleviating all forms of poverty in the long term.
Mhm. Yes, and that does. It makes such a difference. And there's no better gift for our world because, gosh, the cure to COVID and everything else is probably in somebody that may be in extreme poverty that didn't have equal or fair education,
Yeah,
that didn't, but yet it's already inside of them. And they just need to have somebody believe in them and give them that hand and step so they can get there, and
exactly.
it's going to bless the entire world. That's just my belief.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yes, and so there's just more. There's
Yeah,
more. People are like, well, if I give some of my pie away, then there's not enough for me. I'm like, wait a
not
minute.
enough. Yeah,
You know what? That it's like an endless piece of pie here, and the more you give, the more you receive. This is the way it is. If
exactly.
you don't share with the world, then you're in this world. That's why I think that's kind of why we're suffering right now, the way we are. And it's like we all got sent to our room to think about this and
Really.
hopefully change and make some good changes. Look, now they've actually created all these shelters for people because of the virus. And so maybe hopefully there is change, and it does come from more than, like you said, it's more than just a shelter. It's like, okay, but how do we get back on the path so that you know you can function and have your own place again, and be able to contribute, because everybody has something they can contribute.
Definitely.
And when you're in contribution, that's the gift. That's the gift for you and for the other people. So if you're listening in right now and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm out of work, how can I give to anyone? Guess what? The best way to actually get resumes, get people to write an example for you to get a job or to see you, is to go volunteer in something you love, something you truly are passionate about. Kids, homeless, animals, whatever your passion is, go volunteer and use your talents volunteering. And guess what? I can almost guarantee you somebody will be like, wow, I want to hire you to help in this. Or I have a reference. I'll give you a letter of reference because I see who you are. I see your talents. I see how you're showing up. And that's how I have had so many job offers just from volunteering that I never even wanted the jobs. I mean, like, I wasn't looking for a job, but it just happened. And they were like,
Yeah.
no, no, you have to just fill out the application after the fact because I see you. I see
It's
how
yeah,
you're that's it. That's it. And so that's a way.
it definitely goes back into that same idea of the investing of time. Like I'm sure you didn't volunteer at those places once or twice and then suddenly have someone offer you a job. It takes, like maybe weeks, months of time building up those relationships, getting to know the role, getting to know the work, etc. But that's, and again, it comes back to the same thing. Like we have to think more critically about how we are engaging in these issues. Is it, are you once or twice, once or twice a year thinking about this topic won't change it. You have to really dedicate time and energy into whatever you're going into. In this context, of course, it's that volunteering, and then from there, things build and grow. Like you're offered opportunities, you meet new people, those connections, and not everybody has access to those connections either. So finding opportunities to build these bridges, and I really hope as a result of this time a lot of us have spent inside, we've had this opportunity to understand the value of connections and community, because I think that is the untapped resource that we really need to dig into, because the counter to that is, of course, oh, I want my piece of the pie for me, myself, and my family as a slight extension of that. But everyone can have a piece of the pie. There's enough pie to go around. We can expand the size of the pie even, right? So it's really about how best can we distribute this pie and increase its size so that everyone's able to benefit, everyone's able to move forward. Like we have the resources, we have the wealth, we have the
Yeah.
resources, we have the money. It's just a matter of getting it to the right people and making sure everyone has an opportunity to contribute, right? So
Yes.
that
And
definitely agree. Just investing more time.
there's no way to be depressed and in contribution in the same time.
Yeah.
It's like impossible. And it's one of the things, I've done a lot with the Tony Robbins group and gone to all his events. And one of the things, he has these breakthrough programs. And every time someone's going through a really tough time, he'll give them a challenge to go contribute, to go work at a homeless shelter. And there's like these movies that he has in these breakthrough programs, and it shows how the people will go and do these gifts of contribution. And so they're out of their head, and they're in their heart space, and they're helping others. And then they're like, okay, well, my problem's not so bad, and I'm helping other people, and they're caring about other people. And it just helps them get through that time. And that's like the first thing he always, that's like his first prescription to helping people get back on track in these breakthrough programs. So it really is a gift that goes both ways.
Definitely.
It really blesses all involved. Yes. Yes. So now, is your book already out, or is it going to be out soon?
Yes, it's available for sale at on barnesandnobles.com. It's also available in my small hometown, Ocala, Florida. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Kobo. It's available at Walmart. I have a list of places it's available on upliftandempower.com if people would like to go out and order. But yes, it's available online pretty much everywhere books are sold internationally. So
Okay. And what is the name of the book exactly? Again,
thank you for
the
the sale.
title of the book?
Uplift and Empower.
Uplift and Empower. So that's a book to get. Get that book today. That sounds like a great book. I'm going to grab a copy. And that's something that is going to help you help other people and yourself at the same time during this very interesting year, we all need to get uplifted and empowered to even better places. So that is incredible. Thank you again for being a guest on the show. And we will be back after these messages. So stay tuned. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.